My name is Ruth Hudson, and I'm Al's little sister, and I make quilts. Well, I sew a lot of things. I sew quilts, hats, baby blankets, occasional Renaissance clothes. I've made a prom dress. Gonna be making a wedding dress in the future. Kind of nervous about that one. But I enjoy making quilts the most. Baby quilts are fun, short, quick, a lot easier than the big quilts. I've made some t-shirt quilts. Those are always fun to see people's memories and their shirts and sweatshirts and stuff like that, making it in a quilt. They always come out better than people expected, to see all their memories all in one piece. I'd say making big quilts is my favorite. They just seem more satisfying, and I guess I use them more because there's not a baby around, so we don't use any baby quilts, although we are expecting a baby shortly. So I will be making lots of quilts for my grandbaby. Let's see, making a quilt is fun, but it's a lot of work. More work than people think. First, you have to decide the pattern, and it has a lot to do with shapes, geometric shapes, how things fit together. A lot of measuring and adding and trying to figure out what size squares added together will make what size row, added together will make what size quilt. And if you're not doing squares, you're doing triangles and all sorts of stuff like that. So sewing has a lot to do with math. For people who don't think it does, it really does. So you have to pick out what patterns you want. Then you have to go and you have to pick all the fabric, which is the funnest part because I love fabric shopping. But it can also be the most overwhelming because you have to figure what color scheme you want, and then you have to pick all the different fabrics. You want main colors and then coordinating colors and lighter colors that don't blend as much. And then you have to make sure you don't get overwhelmed with all the patterns of the fabric. And so that takes a lot of time and thinking and planning. And when you're finally done with all that, then you have to figure out how much you're going to need for how big of a quilt. And then once you get all that done, all the cutting. You have to cut. And the quilt behind me is my favorite quilt. It took over 3,000 pieces of material that I had to cut out. And then, of course, you have to sew those 3,000 pieces together. So that was a lot of work. It's a quilt that I had to make after my twin brother passed away. It was my healing quilt, which was hard to do, but I had to do it. So that's why it's my favorite quilt. It took a long time because most of the time I didn't want to work on it because it made me cry. But it ended up being my prettiest and my favorite quilt. So that was hard to do, but fun at the same time. So sewing all those 3,000 pieces together was a lot of little triangles that were like started out in, I think, 2-inch squares that I would have to cut diagonally and make into 1-inch triangles, and then sew those back together to make a 2-inch square, which seems kind of funny to do, but that's how you get your patterns. And then so it was a lot of sewing. And then the applique, I don't know if you can see it around the sides, that you have to do by hand. So that was more work. So quilts are a lot of work. Once you get the top part all sewn together and done the way you like it, you have to make sure it's square, and hopefully it ends up that way. Sometimes it doesn't. Then you have to put it on you can either sew it, quilt it together by hand, which you have your top part, and then you have what's called batting in the middle, which can be cotton, wool, polyester, there's all sorts. Polyester and thickness too. They can be really thin or really thick, depending on if you want a winter quilt or a summer quilt. The polyester is a little cooler, breathes a little better, which you usually make for summer quilts. And the cotton and wool, of course, is a lot thicker, a lot heavier, and a lot warmer. So you usually use those for winter quilts. So you take your batting and your top fabric, and then you take a backing fabric, which is usually just a big piece of all one type of fabric. I usually use sheets. I cheat, so I go buy a king size sheet, a flat sheet, and then I take out all the seams in it and use that, because that's a lot cheaper than buying yards and yards of material and then sewing it all together. So that's a little secret. And then you can do that by hand, put it all together and quilt it by hand, which is what they used to do in the olden days, which takes forever. Or you can do it on your sewing machine, which you have to roll it all up and pin it all together and then try and stuff it through your sewing machine, which is very complicated, but a lot of people do. Or you can use a quilting machine, which is what I have here. This is my favorite toy. You have to put the different layers on, different rolls here. You put the top, first you put the backing on first because it's the underneath part. Then you put the batting in between, and then you put your top piece of the quilt top on top, of course. And you pin them all to the very back rod, which is called the backing. The take-up rod, the take-up rod. You have all those pinned together. And then you have your quilting machine here that you it moves all around very nicely, so you can go in any direction and do any kind of design you want, which is a lot of fun. And it goes pretty quick, pretty easy, as long as you have the right threads on there. Some threads break quite a bit, like metallics, and that can be kind of aggravating when your thread doesn't work with you. But for the most part, it's a lot of fun. On the back part, I have a little laser stylus so I can trace patterns. And you can make your own patterns to trace, or you can do freehand by standing in the front and just doing whatever kind of patterns you want. Freehand. So it's a lot of fun. I did make one quilt for my son. It's all black, and I took glow-in-the-dark thread and quilted all around on the top with the glow-in-the-dark thread. So at night, when you turn off the lights to go to sleep, his quilt actually glows, which is a lot of fun. It's pretty cool. So you can use metallic threads. I had a Christmas quilt that I made, and I sewed metallic thread on top, so it had a bit of a Christmas sparkle to it. That was a lot of fun. And you have variegated threads, which is a thread that has different colors all in it. It goes from one color and it blends all the way to another color. So that can make a really pretty design on the quilt. So quilting involves a lot of steps, a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of practice. But they're worth it in the end. That's kind of why they cost so much when you go to buy them somewhere. I mean, a homemade, handmade quilt can be expensive, but it is worth it in the long run. I think, anyway, after I'm done making them. I charge, let's see, the t-shirt quilts that I've made in the past, that's a lot of work too, because people bring you their t-shirts or their sweatshirts or whatever kind of clothing they have. Usually t-shirts and sweatshirts because they have the logos on them. And you have to cut those all out, figure out what kind of pattern they want. If they just want the t-shirt pieces cut out in crazy shapes and sewn together, or if they want them basically cut out in squares and sewn together like that with material in the middle, or just, you know, whatever kind of patterns you do. That takes a lot of planning, and you have to be really careful cutting that stuff out, because you don't want to cut up somebody's shirt and then, because whoops, you can't go back and do it again. So those, I've made a couple of queen size, a couple of throw size. Most people like them for throw size. I'd say they're anywhere from $100 to $500. It's a lot of work. Cutting it all up, sewing it all together, and then quilting it. And people usually have more than they think they do. Like, one lady brought me her shirts, and she had 40 shirts. And she was thinking, oh, this probably won't make maybe a throw size. Well, when I ended up getting it all cut out and planned together, it made 2 king size quilts. So then she had to decide what she wanted to do. Get rid of some memories, make 2 blankets, what do you have to do? So it can be a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's worth it in the end. It's relaxing. It's something I enjoy doing.
Okay, get started.